we're going to switch it up a little bit. So part of our story is how we got to what we're doing today. I'm going to jump to the end, and then I'll talk about how we got here. So today, we ultimately serve small businesses, but we don't serve them directly. So we always go through a channel partner. And because of that, I thought it made sense to invite Sridhar up here, talk a little bit about how our respective businesses work together, and what our model ultimately looks like now, 8 years after founding.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about how we started. My name is Rich Aberman, co-founder of WePay, currently run strategy for the team. We started the company in 2008, and really the original goal was to scratch our own itch. We were collecting money from friends for a variety of different things. At that point, PayPal had really shifted its focus to be more of a traditional merchant services provider for eBay sellers. And we thought with Facebook opening up its platform, with smartphones in the App Store, there should be an easier, more mobile, social way to send your friends money. As it turns out, that's a very, very hard, kind of peer-to-peer payments is a very hard business to build as a standalone company. So I'm just curious, any of you guys do like peer-to-peer payments, send money to friends? What do you use? Venmo. Right, Venmo's phenomenal. I use Venmo. Phenomenal product. I remember they started maybe a year or two after us, got initial traction as we did, and now they're massive. I mean, they've been totally blown out, but they sold the company fairly early on to Braintree, which kind of rolled it up and then eventually sold to PayPal. Then with that larger platform and not having to build a standalone business, they were able to kind of really blow it out and get massive distribution. For us, the story was a little bit different. So we were building the product, and we realized once we launched it that monetizing peer-to-peer was very hard. It was hard to find people, just from a customer acquisition perspective, at the decision point. So when you had this need to send money, how do they know about us? Either we needed so much brand equity that we were kind of top of mind, or we had to target them at exactly the decision point, which is expensive from a cost of acquisition perspective. And so almost right away, we began to shift our focus away from just thin peer-to-peer, I need to send someone money, what's the lightest weight, easiest way to do that, to value-add services on top of payments. To make a really long story a little bit shorter, we ended up having two pieces to our product. The first piece was kind of a core payments engine that was very good at onboarding and underwriting what we now call small or micro merchants, people that would otherwise have difficulty going out and getting a traditional merchant account. And then the second piece of the product was the application layer on top of that, which built certain functionality for certain verticals or use cases. So we had an event management platform. We had an invoicing platform. We had a shopping cart platform. We had a fundraising platform. And the idea was that if we wanted to make it easy for people to collect money or accept payments, and provide enough value that they were willing to pay us for that service, we had to provide them both with the payment acceptance capability and the functionality on top of that in order to make valuable use of it. I'm going to transition in a second. The pitch that we were making at the time to the market was, our service is better than other platforms out there because we gave you not just the payments piece, but also the software that made it easy for you to run your event or raise money for your cause or invoice your clients. All things being equal, providing a turnkey solution to those merchants is better than having them cobble together a software SaaS provider and a payment provider. In practice, though, that wasn't enough to overcome the robustness and the quality that a company was able to create by focusing only on a specific merchant use case. So why would you use WePay to build your online store if you could use Ecwid? Why would you use WePay to invoice your clients if you can use FreshBooks? Why would you use WePay to raise money for a personal cause if you can use GoFundMe? And it was the epiphany that what we had to do ourselves in order to create a fully integrated payments experience, and that those other companies wanted to do that, but might not have payments in their DNA, might not want to deal with the risk, regulatory, and operational responsibilities associated with being in the payments business. And so in mid-2012, we peeled off the front end. I think there's another slide that kind of gets us there. There we go. In mid-2012, we peeled off the front end of our business and said we are no longer selling directly to end users, whether they're micro merchants, small businesses, nonprofits, but instead we're going to transition and become an API company. And we're only going to go to market through partners that focus on specific use cases, specific merchant types, are building invoicing platforms and shopping cart platforms and fundraising platforms, but we're going to make it easy for them to build a fully integrated, seamless experience where payments are a core part of what their product does and not some separate service that you have to go out and navigate independently. So with that as kind of the intro, we'd love to turn it over to Sridhar. At some point, our organizations found each other. And you said, we're a shopping cart company. You can't really run an online business without taking payments. We want to take a more active role in building that as a core part of our service.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Rich. So Ecwid has been around now for about 6 or 7 years. We're a cloud-based e-commerce platform, and we primarily focus on small businesses. And as Rich was mentioning, one of the sweet spots that we have are what Rich referred to as micro businesses. So micro businesses are usually aspiring sellers. They're just, they're like, hey, I want to sell something right now, starting right now, tomorrow. I have a very small window of opportunity, and I have a small amount of time available, usually because I have other jobs that I'm doing, and this is something I want to do on the side. And the key is, how do you get these guys and gals all around the world selling super quickly? And the most important thing is, as Rich mentioned, is onboarding them quickly and helping them make that first sale. Because that window is sometimes seconds, sometimes minutes, sometimes you have a couple of days, but making that experience as seamless as possible is critical to creating success for those small merchants and the micro merchants. And one of the biggest hurdles that small and micro businesses have when they're going through their setup process is, funnily enough, payments. And I've been in the payments business a little while, and Rich has been in a little while. So payments is the plumbing that pretty much runs all of these online stores and omni-channel stores. But it is difficult. It is difficult for small business to set up. And what WePay did for Ecwid was make that process super seamless. And our goal was to enable what we call one-click payments for our customers. And literally one click. What I mean by that is, and you can go check it out on Ecwid if you sign up for Ecwid, you literally click, say, I want to start enable Ecwid payments now, and you will be able to start collecting payments on your online store. And that's what we wanted to be able to get to. And that experience for us was critical. And WePay was one of the few platforms out there that actually allowed and enabled us to do that. So we started working with WePay about a year ago, and the experience has been fantastic because not only does it require a great product, but it also requires a great partnership to build out the product integration, but also then to build out the processes behind it, because payments is difficult, and you have lots of small businesses, especially at scale. So we have typically in the region of 20,000 merchants a month signing up to our platform. We have over 1.5 million registered users. So at that scale, we need to be able to deliver payments super slickly. And that's something that WePay allowed us to do. And we went live with WePay about 3 months ago, and we've already got thousands of merchants who've enabled Ecwid payments powered by WePay. And that's led to the kind of feedback, which I think if you flick through will give you, you can see some of the. So this is the kind of merchants that we deal with. I mean, Tracy is one of our customers, and she's got a website called Sending Serendipity, and she sells, online jewelry, and we've got thousands of such merchants. And what we're trying to do is make them successful. And one of the things here was Ecwid Payments, and we've had her since beta, and and Tracy's just been a great customer of ours, and she didn't realize how easy it was to set up a store, A, and B, set up payments on that store. So here's an example of a real example of a customer of ours who has gone through that process of setting up a store and accepting payments to and building up a successful business ground up, because she started off from zero. So it's a good example. The other thing also I wanted to talk about briefly is, just from a partnership standpoint, it is in order to make this successful, in order to really scale, it is important to have a tight partnership with a platform as a service provider, like WePay. And the reason that's critically important is because it helped us, at least personally, integrate a lot of the back-end processes to be able to make sure that the customer experience was seamless when the handoffs happened. And WePay has done a fantastic job trying to ensure that all of these touch points are as, for example, white labeled as possible, making sure that things are as you have escalated customer support between the two organizations to make sure that issues are addressed super quickly. Because again, going back to the point I made, if I'm a small business owner like Tracy and I set up a store, I email Ecwid or Ecwid Payments and say, I need a response not in tomorrow, but in a couple of hours. And that's something that we've been able to deliver with Ecwid Payments, and it happened because of the partnership with WePay. So I actually want to throw it back to Rich, and he mentioned one thing about pivoting. So why small businesses? What was so specific and what was so attractive about the small business pivot, and as opposed to mid-market or further up chain?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we roughly divide our market into 3 categories. There's fundraising platforms, which generally work with both individuals and nonprofits. There's marketplaces that connect buyers and sellers. And then there's SMB SaaS platforms that help small businesses. What we found is the trend of small businesses turning to software to grow faster and run more efficiently, at this point, is indubitable, right? Like 10 years ago, the way a small business would do payroll, advertise, manage inventory, manage employees, was kind of these manual, ad hoc, homegrown solutions. Now, there's some vertical specific software package that helps you do that in the cloud. So that trend is there. And the theory that we had is, if you're already running your business using a certain platform, you're already on Ecwid, which is your backbone of your online retail business, that's the most natural conduit for you to get other services. The most obvious is payments. You can't run an online store without having payments. And so the trend was most paramount with small businesses. They're great end users. They had this need. They tend to be infinitely resourceful, but not infinitely sophisticated. And so when we're able to partner with a company like you guys and say, look, it's one turnkey solution in the cloud, you just sign up, and it just kind of works magically, that was a much more potent value proposition than other markets that we can be going after. Medium, large businesses, they have procurement departments, they have a CFO, they can go out and get a merchant account, fill out the paperwork, connect it to whatever platform they're using to run their business, and it's not really a heavy lift. But I think for small businesses that don't have the sophistication to, they're perfecting their crafts. And if you look at like the taglines for most of our partners, it's spend more time doing what you love, less time, blah, 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 right? Less time managing your business, less time in the back office. Yeah. And that's an appealing message for us to go after. I have a question for you. So I'm going to derail it a little bit, talk a little bit less about payments. When we sell to partners, so we come to you guys and say, look, there's this great opportunity, you should take a more active role in payments. Part of that story is convincing you that payments is such a core part of what you do anyways, that you should bring it native. And you should offer that as a core part of your service or functionality. There is a trade-off, right? Like, there's a platform, and part of what platforms want to do is say, yeah, we help you with X, but we'll also provide connective tissue to these other functions that you need. We have to come to you and say, well, it doesn't make sense for payments to be another function. It makes sense for that to be a core part of your offering. How do you kind of balance what makes sense to bring in-house and offer as a core feature of your service versus more of a open integration model where you could say to your customers, look, we're never going to be able to satisfy the full list of functionality you need?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rich. For us, we're a small company, just like you're a startup. We test the heck out of everything, first thing. And the other thing is revenue potential. So we saw there are certain areas where we see significant revenue potential, and payments is actually one of them. Surprisingly, I mean, people go, "Well, really? It's I mean, there's all these processors out there, gateways. You really think?" So actually, it is. It is a huge revenue opportunity for us, and also, secondly, the other thing we look at is how core is it to the person in that segment. So if I'm in a small business, there are certain things that are super core, like payments, like building out the actual store, the website, and so on. And then there are certain things that are just kind of at the margins. An example of that would be, let's say, accounting. And the other piece of it also is that balanced against complexity, because sure, we could, we may say, why not white label an accounting app? Probably technically could, but at this point in time, the complexity of doing that, and there's so many great products out there that provide that solution, it's not worth it. The cost-benefit analysis is not worth it.
So when you guys were the tip of the spear, so I'm starting a nascent online retail business. I come to Ecwid to build my shopping cart. You are in a unique position to direct them towards service providers that can help them with these various functions. So how do you think, even from a BD perspective, if not an integration perspective, how do you think about addressing? So accounting is a great example. Where do you send them?
So we actually, good thing you asked that. We have an app market, and we have various levels of integration in our app market. We actually currently have over 120 apps in our app market. Some of them very tightly integrated, like, for example, Xero and some accounting apps like that, and some not so tightly integrated. But we have provide that solution to customers to sort of say, hey, we don't do it, but we have some very tightly integrated solutions to provide that if you need to.
That's great. I'm going to go in reverse order, so I hope you guys are able to follow along. I think one of our core theories is that there are certain services which may provide some incremental value as a standalone service, but are much greater value add when they're wrapped up in some broader service. So one of the big kind of narratives in our industry right now is that payments is commoditized, there's price compression, no one wants to pay more than a few cents for a transaction. And so how do we respond to that? I think what we've said, and I think what this partnership represents, is that that's certainly true for payments. What we've done is we've said if we go to market as a standalone payment provider, we're competing with every other robust merchant service provider out there that says, we're going to support every payment method under the sun, we're going to give you next day funding, we're going to give you low cost, it's going to be an easy gateway to integrate into. But at the end of the day, there's not much room for differentiation. One of the things that SMB SaaS platforms have allowed is almost infinite verticalization or localization of functionality. So what a landscaper needs from small business software is very different from what a plumber needs for small business software. If you're setting up a retail business, you need very different functionality than if you're setting up a service business. If you're running a small veterinary clinic, it's a very different business requiring very different functionality than if you're an Uber driver. And what we said is, how do we capitalize on the differentiation and value add that these platforms are able to create by hyper-focusing on particular verticals or particular use cases from a payments perspective? And so we've identified three key areas where that's the case. The first is just the onboarding user experience. If I'm a small merchant and I'm not technically sophisticated, I don't have a finance or a procurement department, and I go out and get a merchant account from a traditional retail bank, they'll say, great, you've been approved. Here's our API specification to integrate a gateway. Or here's your VAR tear sheet to go connect this to some other software platform. Half the people in this room don't know what that means. Like, certainly a small business is not going to know what that means. The benefit of going through a value-add platform like Ecwid is that you as a small business can say, I want to build an online store. You sign up for that, and automatically you're enabled to start accepting payments. There's no kind of onboarding friction or process that you need to go through. I think the best equivalent I can give there is if you sign up for Uber or Lyft as a driver, you don't have to go out and get a merchant account separately and figure out how to connect the two. Part of the process of signing up for that solution to start your micro business, your independent micro business, is payments. And so instead of having to go out and source that separately and connect the two, you just sign up for Uber, you're driving, and you get paid electronically. The second is lower cost. I think there's really two pieces to this. One is every one of your guys' software platforms has a customer acquisition strategy, right? You go out, you find customers, you sell them on your unique value proposition. Our ability to ride those rails for distribution, as opposed to going out and spending the same money to acquire the same customers in a different context, allows us to deliver the service at a lower cost. I think the less obvious piece is you also have a tremendous amount of contextual data about your small businesses. One of the biggest challenges in the payments industry is how do you make sure you know who this business is and how they operate so that you're not taking on financial or regulatory risk by processing payments for a bad guy. As it turns out, when you're using an invoicing platform or you're using a shopping cart platform, you're generating all this contextual data that a company like WePay can leverage in order to make better underwriting decisions at a lower cost and with less friction. And third, you're able to provide more value to that small business. So instead of saying, now that you have a merchant account, you can provide a convenience to your customers. You can allow them to pay with a credit card. Like, that's great, but it's fairly thin value. When you sign up for a driver on Uber or Lyft, it's not just an electronic transaction, but that's fully integrated into how you run your micro business, right? It's connected to a particular passenger and a particular ride. If you're using project management and client invoicing software, it's connected to a milestone, to a project, to a client, and in your case, to a piece of inventory. You wrap up all of those things, and we've conceded and said, we don't think payments is a standalone business. The whole, is it a feature or is it a product? We think payments is a feature, not a product. And so that was really the epiphany where we said, we're going to retire our direct business, the standalone payments business, which at the time was over 50% of our revenue as a company. We were 4 years in at that point. So we had this business that we started the company to form. We had invested in building brand equity around it. We had a name, WePay, which suggested it was a direct consumer business. It was growing month over month. It was over 50% of our revenue as a business. We had raised, I think, $40 million in capital to go after it. And we said, let's take a hard look at payments as a business and as a space. And do we believe that we can sell that as a standalone product? Or do we believe there's this other trend of small businesses using software and expecting to get payment services and probably other financial services through that software? And spoke to our board. And at that point, we retired our direct business and went all in on what we call a channel strategy now.
All right, that's great. Can you guys maybe talk a little bit about, as much as you can, the financial arrangement between you guys? Because I know that obviously you're a feature of you guys, and then you're obviously resold through other other companies that offer SMBs full sites, and maybe a little bit about how you track or budget performance over time, how you might incent each other, as much as you can. Obviously, it's financial stuff, but it'd be great to understand how you guys look upon each as a channel and how you budget for growth and incent and how the economics might change over time.
Yeah,
Thanks.
So let me frame it that I would love for you to kind of answer specifically.
Sure.
Our general model is different partners have different portfolios and different price sensitivity depending on how they think about payments. So as an individual raising money on a crowdfunding platform, your expectations around what you pay for payments might be different than a small business building a retail storefront. So we've acknowledged that part of the benefit of our channel model is that our partners are in a much better position to decide what price points make the most sense. The relationships work out best when they're looking to maximize revenue vis-a-vis payments. And then we work it out on the back end with our partners, whether it's a buy rate or a rev share arrangement. And we provide them with the tooling that they need to experiment with different price points. But we are not experts in how to price even payments to the end user. We really rely on our partners, and we collaborate with them to set. So I would love to kind of hear your thought process.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed. So our agreement is a rev share agreement. It's very much based on processing volume. So the metric that we measure ourselves against and the goals that we set for each other is based on processing volume. So processing volume through the platform. So how much is the aggregate volume processed by all of our merchants through the platform? So that's received merchandise volume, GMV, or you can call it payment volume, which is total. TPV is the sort of acronym that we use in the industry. It's called total payment volume, or GMV is gross merchandise volume. So the amount of volume that goes through the entire platform is what we track, because ultimately that's the health of two things: health of the partnership and also the health of the overall businesses that are in our ecosystem. So.
How important, what percentage of your revenue is actually coming from this partnership here? And is it growing as much as you can say? I mean, are they...
Meaning Ecwid as a percentage of our overall portfolio?
Right, yeah.
I honestly wouldn't even know how to answer that if I could. I don't know how big Ecwid is relative to other partners. I will say, though, just in terms of like a relative...
Obviously, it's not that big.
I
mean, they're not driving 50% of your growth.
They're not driving 50% of our growth. So our growth comes from two forms. One is bringing on new partners, and the other is seeing those partners grow. I think one of the realities of our model is the more integrated payments is in their offering, and the more it's a core part of what they're selling, the faster their payments business will grow. Now, we don't have full visibility as to whether that's relative to their core business or whether it's growing disproportionately, but the reality is it takes time to ramp. So, say it again?
Yeah, it's just so that we're clear, we're only 3 months into the partnership. So clearly, I can answer that. The volume of growth that we've seen in the past 3 months is kind of unprecedented from what compared to the other payment platforms that we've integrated with in the past. So it surprised even us. So we did not anticipate having many thousands of merchants activating this in such a short span of time, and payment volume growing. I mean, it's been growing like gangbusters. So we're growing, doubling almost month over month. So
I'm making up numbers here, but let's say I think one of the challenges of our business is if we sell to a mature business like Ecwid, they have a portfolio of merchants. Those merchants are already setting up accepting payments somehow. Likely they've gone out, they've gotten a merchant account with Authorize.net or PayPal or Stripe or Wells Fargo Merchant Services. They're up and running. When we launch a partnership, we'll get net new merchants, right? So merchants that are signing up for the platform because they're not deciding what payment provider they're using. They've picked Ecwid, and payments comes along for the ride. And so we'll get net new merchants together, and then those merchants will ramp. But part of the challenge is the bulk of the value on day one is in the existing portfolio. So even if you have a base of 40,000 merchants and you're acquiring 1,000 a week, those 1,000 have to set up their store. They have to ramp. And so we can be going after a business that's got hundreds of thousands of merchants and is growing like gangbusters and is doing wonderfully. But these are relationships, and I think the nature of our business is that there is a ramp period. There is a real time to value. And so I think part of the reason why I just can't speak intelligently about Ecwid's kind of portion of our portfolio is that even though the relationship is a year in the making, the actual payments business and ramp is still relatively nascent. I think you kind of quoted really amazing, exciting growth numbers. And then the hope is that that continues and we chip away at the existing portfolio. But these relationships take a year, 2, 3 years to mature.
Yeah, and I mean, just to add on to that point, a good point about new versus existing merchants. So the existing portfolio is still on, they're already processing through a current partnership that they have. So, at some point in time, they may decide, hey, you know what, I want to move to Ecwid payments too. And then we start seeing the real big jump in the existing payment volume that's on the platform. So that's...
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, great.
Good topic. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Good topic. I'm in the same challenge that Sridhar found himself in with onboarding merchants and getting them set up as quickly as possible. And payments is a very integral piece of it. So 3 years ago, we started with Vantev's PayFac platform. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Yep. Over time, we found out that there's a lot of hidden fees and audits and stuff. So I guess my question to you is, how do you see payment aggregation versus payment facilitation playing out in the future? Eventbrite is doing payment aggregation. They're holding the funds until the date of the event and then just they distribute that after.
Yep.
That's a question for you and for Sridhar. How have you seen existing merchants that are ramping up? I'm guessing that you're packaging the price at 2.9 plus 30 cents. As these merchants are ramping up to significant volume on a monthly basis, are they pushing you back to say, hey, lower my fees, and how are you handling that? So,
You want to take that one first? Yeah.
That's the easy
I
one.
want to make sure I get an answer to that.
So we've actually set up, when we started, we set up our pricing based on tiers. So we have subscription tiers for our direct merchants. And we start at 2.9 and we go all the way down to 2.75 if you're on our higher tiers. And because that correlates to the size and quality of the merchant and the volume processed. So that's sort of how it happens. We, to go to your question about our customers pushing back, not yet. I mean, we haven't been live long enough to get customers pushing back saying, hey, you're charging me too much, because 2.9 is pretty much the rate wherever you go. So it's not as though it's egregious in any way. So the rate's pretty well set in the market. So that's not too much of a challenge. But I think where the price pressure comes is when you have existing merchants and who want to migrate over, right? And they're on, it's not as much of a challenge if they're on Stripe or if they're on PayPal, because the fees are relatively transparent. But if you're going from auth, for example, I mean, I'm getting technical here, but if you're on auth.net or an old school payment gateway or Vantiv, it does become a challenge, because then you've got to sort of say, well, I'm only paying 1.9, but then we say, well, actually you're not. You're paying 2.7 effectively. So that, I think, is, we haven't got to that yet, but yeah, we have a sort of plan of how we want to address that.